Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here, making some special time today for we'll call the joint meeting of the Urbandale City Council meeting, Urbandale City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission to order, and ask Nicole to take roll call, please.
Carberry Montgomery. Here. Kroll. Here. McBurney.
Here.
Nicholas. Here. Let's see. Hatfield.
Yes.
Galante.
Here.
Brackey.
Here.
Van Hoevlin. Yes. And Nicholas. Did I see? Okay.
You're here twice, Jackie, right?
You're here twice. Perfect. Thank you.
There we go. All right, thank you. I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Ms. McCall,
Second.
second by McBurney. Discussion, roll call, please.
Kroll.
Yes.
McBurney.
Yes.
Carberry Montgomery.
Yes.
Nicholas.
Here.
Hollis.
Yes, whatever.
Lee is not here. Hatfield.
Yes.
Galante. Brackey.
Yes. Yes.
Van Hoevlin.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on then to our regular agenda, and that's a discussion on the update on comprehensive planning and vision plans consultant. AJ, you can start us off.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Council and Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you for joining us tonight. This will hopefully be a very productive session for all of you. As you can see, the staff is here. We have a number of questions, or two very prominent questions to ask you to get your feedback, provide you some support information that we have. But I'd like to start the meeting and have our Director of Support Services and Risk Management, John Conyer, kind of kick the meeting off as to some of how we've gotten here and some of the issues that we've been dealing with at a staff level, primarily John has been dealing with at a staff level for the last several weeks. Just as a quick recap, as we move forward as a community in looking to update our comprehensive plan, the mayor formed a committee of members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Council, and staff. We went through a very extensive process of review, developing an RFP, interviewing vendors, and coming up with the selection of Housel Levine to do the study for us. Through that whole process, John spearheaded that for us, and then John was the continued staff liaison between the city and Housel Levine to coordinate those activities of getting information out, getting information from staff, coordinating those meetings, et cetera. We won't go into a lot of detail about some of the low points that we hit, but just kind of a recap of where we are now in that process and how we plan to be moving forward. So with that, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, AJ. Mayor, Council, PNC Commission. Nicole, how do I, is it just the computer screen here? There we go. Excellent, thank you. So wanted to give you a quick update on the work that Housel Levine has done to date and what their projects and tasks are for the completion of the comprehensive plan and the focus group vision plans as well. So kind of appropriate, everything in blue and green here are the things that Housel has completed for us. So that includes engagement. They've been here on site back in April of 2022. They wrapped that up and did the existing conditions report, reported that out to this joint group back at the end of September of 2022, and then worked on the vision goals and land use framework. And that was reported back out in the middle of October of 2022. And really up until that point, things were going pretty well. Timelines were being met and things were on their way to hopefully a March 2023 completion. Being the second day of May, we have missed that mark. So we had some more in-depth discussions with Housel. The vision plans piece, we did get a draft vision plan. Staff reviewed that, provided information back to Housel. Never got a final draft to come out to you all, and that is 5H and 5I on this Gantt chart here. That they are to provide a joint meeting with P&Z and council, and then hold a public open house. And then did get one of the 6 possible core framework plans, and then we really hit a roadblock at that point. Did not have the best of luck with our project lead. Escalated things up the chain and actually got the attention of John Housel, who actually co-owns the company. He has stepped up and wants to make things right. Staff has talked about what could that be, and our first step is he and a team from HL, a different team than the team that we've had, will be here on May 25th and 26th to meet with staff and to kind of reset the comp plan process. The hope is that then they would work through this the last page that we had seen, kind of the 5, 6, and 7 steps to get us to a final comp plan sometime hopefully before the end of 2023. It could be probably October, November. It may slide a little bit, but they wouldn't know that and they couldn't provide that information until they would come here on site on the 25th and 26th, meet with staff. We can understand where they're coming from. They can understand where we are and where we would like to go, and then see if that works for us to do a reset and to move the comp plan process forward. Communication and touch points is definitely a point that we probably lacked on, and so they have agreed that they will meet with staff weekly, virtually, to make sure that things move and progress forward, kind of across that part. So we have confidence that with John Housel being our project lead and a new team coming here and giving us the chance to assess where we would like to go and let them have the chance to explain to us how they can get us there, that we can have the comp plan done by the end of 2023. So that is an update. You all were scheduled to be here and not have this great group in front of you, but actually the Housel group to talk about kind of step 6 and 7. But we really felt it was important based on where we have gone to this point in the comp plan to have a discussion with P&Z and council about 2 major items. And all of them revolve around growth. What does growth look like for Urbandale? And where do we want that to be? And how aggressive do you want that to happen? So this is my 5 minutes or so of fame up here really quick. And I'm going to turn the floor over now to Steve Franklin, who will come up and walk you through with the group of everyone else here with Christy, John, AJ, Aaron, and Curtis, to walk you through that really important issue of what does growth look like for Urbandale. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve now.
Mayor, did you want a formal motion on 3.2 or just go ahead and slide right into it? Okay. All right, so some ground rules here. We talked about this. We don't have much time. We're gonna have a hard stop at 5:45 so we can get ready for council. So this is gonna go quick. So because of that, this is a big picture discussion. We're not gonna have a comp plan tonight. We're not gonna design anything tonight. We're looking for quick general thoughts on what you think about these topics. Not gonna vote on anything, but we're trying to see if we can find a consensus on some of these things because it will direct the conversations that we're gonna have with Housel Levine as we move the comp plan forward. So again, very big picture. Maybe think of these issues in terms of what's broken in Urbandale that needs to be fixed. Okay, and that's not to suggest there isn't anything, but we have a lot of good things. And so maybe thinking about it in those terms, or what doesn't Urbandale have that it really needs? And so within that context, think about some of the things that we do have. And so for example, on the residential side, we have fantastic parks and trails. That's a big deal. We have the Eden Crest senior facility, which is getting built at the roundabout 142nd and Douglas, just east of there, that can complement Deerfield. So we've got that type of a housing option. And we've got an improving mix, not great, but an improving mix of lot sizes and housing options driven primarily by the market. And that's part of what we want to talk about. Is that what we want to do, or does the city want to drive that more? And then on the commercial side, what do we have? Think in those terms. We have a Homemakers. We have a large Hy-Vee across the street. We have a Home Depot. Those are all, that's a big deal. We have a Super Target, okay? We have those. people say, oh, I'm going to go to Grimes and go to whatever, or go to Waukee and go to whatever. Well, okay, but when they want to go to a Super Target, where do they probably come? Urbandale. Or if they want to go to Home Depot, where do they probably come? Urbandale. You know, that's just kind of how that stuff kind of works. And then we're about to start construction on a 450,000 square foot cross-dock warehouse at 128th and Meredith, which the only other part of the metro that has something like that right now is Altoona. So we're well positioned in some ways. So think about the things that we do have in perspective with what's broken that needs to be fixed or what don't we have that we really need. So maybe have that rolling around in the back of your brain as we start getting into some of this. So we want to talk to you real quick about what does growth mean to you in terms of annexation and residential development and commercial development. And this map, actually, I'm going to go to the next one. So you've got handouts in front of you. This is small, but hopefully you can see the colors. But that's our current corporate boundaries in the blue. And then everything that you see that's in the green color are lots that where a preliminary plat's been approved. So there may just be a handful of houses in there. That does not mean that that area is built out, okay? But you can see the areas where there are no lots up at the north in the corner, the far northwestern corner, and then up along the line with Grimes. And then there's a couple in between here and there, but you can see the parcels that don't have anything planned at this point, along with what's in the green where there's been a preliminary plat, but there's still lots of development to go. So, you know, in terms of annexation, there's several different ways that we can kind of think about this. And there's really 4 different areas that I kind of want to cover with you. So one strategy would be to acquire 422 acres that's adjacent to the Grimes line right now. And these agreements, we should say, we put it in there, but these agreements are in place until 2031. Okay, so we've got 8 more years of these are where the lines are. Got a line with Grimes where Grimes agrees they won't go south of it, we won't go north of it. We've got a line with Waukee where they've agreed they won't go north of it, we won't go south of it. And so we've got about a 2-mile swath there. If you look at that distance between the 2 red lines, that is in place until 2031. And so part of what we need to think about is what, if anything, needs to happen between now and 2031, and then what happens after that. You probably know this, but each of these sections here, each of these squares is a square mile. And so you can see with this current line, we're still about a mile east of Dallas Center, roughly their current boundary. And our current limits end at 184th Street, which is this line right here, which is also known as V Avenue. So there's, like I said, 4 different kind of things that we probably want to think about in terms of annexation. One is acquiring all of this ground that's right here, which is adjacent to the Grimes line. That totals about 422 acres. And then 2, which is going to be 1A and 1B too, would be acquired. There's 2 different properties located right here up against the corner. It'd be that northeast corner of our line with Grimes up against 142nd Street. There's 2 properties there that total about 155 acres. So you're looking at 577 acres if we could get all of those properties in. And we are in the process of trying to communicate with those people. Touch on that here a little bit more in a second. The third thing that we can think about in terms of annexation is this little area down here, which is currently part of Grimes. Everybody's painfully aware of that. That's the Schaefer Day and Harding properties. We have talked to those property owners, and they are not interested at this time coming into Urbandale. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that here in just a second. So first strategy is pick up these 2 properties up here against the Grimes line. We're in the process of trying to go through that and get that done so that we can kind of square this off hopefully one day. The next thing to think about and we can talk about is what do we want to do with these properties? Do we want to wait and see if they'll come in? Do we want to be more aggressive? And the 4th option is what, if anything, do we acquire west of our current terminus, which is 184th Street? So you got all this land out here. The fact of the matter is, if we don't do anything, likely at some point, either Grimes or Waukee or Dallas Center is going to try to take some of that. And so part of what you think about is, when does being landlocked become okay? And I've got some stats that we can talk about in terms of how many years worth of growth and how many rooftops we're thinking about here, because it's going to be primarily residential. That's what we are. But at some point, You know, if we stop now and we try to square off this boundary and don't do anything more, we're landlocked by choice. We could go another mile to the west, another 2 miles to the west. At some point, we're going to get up against Dallas Center if we would ever go that far, and we are going to be landlocked. We're going to make the decision to not go any farther. So part of what to think about, and again, this is a big picture conversation, is when is that okay that we don't have any more land going to the west? So that's one thing to think about. Directly related to services for annexation when it comes to sewer and roads and things like that. We've been thinking about that. I'm going to have John come up here and just give you a brief overview in terms of roads and sanitary sewer service and serving all these areas, because that's part of what you do. If you annex ground, you have to be able to provide services. Law requires that. And we've been looking at that, so I want John to give you just a little bit of background about where we are relative to that topic, and then we can talk a little bit more about how much growth we have and get a little bit more specific about annexation.
All right, so hello, everybody. I am John Larson. I'm the Director of Engineering and Public Works. So I am going to kind of run you through some of the engineering and public works services we provide and also utility services. So as Steve was saying, if we did look to annex more ground to the west, we'd have to look at providing water service. So that would be something we would work with the Urbandale Water Utility on how we would provide service out there. Ultimately, they would provide the service, but we would work with them. We'd also have to work through issues with Xenia already being out there and how that is going to work. And again, that's something that, again, tonight can't really get into great details. It would just take a lot of meetings to get that part figured out. On the sanitary sewer side of things, the sewer out here would be provided by the Urbandale Sanitary Sewer District, or the USSD. Just to give you a point of view, they have looked at some master planning, and they've looked out here about 2.5 miles west of our current border. They've looked at how would things work. Because ideally with a sewer, we'd like to have a gravity service. You don't want to have pump stations where you got to pump it over the hill. And that's where it works out kind of nice, is you get kind of just a little west of this red line here. That's where you kind of get a natural ridge where it would naturally flow back to Dallas Center or naturally flows to Urbandale. So that's kind of where they'd like to be. You know, a little bit of history in Urbandale right now. We only have one lift station, and we're working on a potential project to eliminate that one. Ideally, you do not want lift stations in your community if you can help it. So just to kind of let you know that the district is looking at it. They're committed to, if we annex further and development is going to happen, they're committed to bring the sewer out to them, just like they have done through everything west of the interstate as development has happened. Just one thing to put in your mind, though, the USSD and Urbandale have always kind of kept the same boundaries. Doesn't say they would have to, if, like Steve said, if we decided we were done here, there's still a potential they could continue to serve out west, and then just ultimately they would have the sewer, since everybody's a member of the WRA, and then if it's Waukee, Grimes, whoever, would just connect to those sewers, and they would continue to be their own entity. Or again, we can keep like we are now and keep kind of the same similar boundaries. To hit on the roads, the biggest thing for us is we just have to work out what we would do for maintenance, because there'd be a lot of new gravel roads we'd bring in and a lot of new snow maintenance that we'd have to do, the snow removal. And then one key thing I wanted to point out is right now in this area between 170th Street and out to U Avenue, there's a gap in Waterford Road. So basically it ends at 170th. We've looked at a study on how we could bring it through and reconnect it up at U Avenue. But right now we haven't gone very far, because it's kind of tough when part of the road is in Urbandale, part of it's in Dallas County, and it's really hard to go talk to property owners when you're not in Urbandale. Hey, here's where we'd like to go put a road through your farm field. So if it did get annexed in, at least that would give us the ability to start having conversations and look to preserve that corridor where we'd like Waterford Road. Because we looked at several options, but one kind of brings it through, swings it up along the power lines, and then brings it back down. So again, without it being in the city, it's difficult to start looking at how we would extend the road on through. So I guess that's kind of just a general overview on what we were looking at for utilities and services that we would provide.
Okay, so with that as background, a couple more things here, and then we want to hear from you. With our current boundaries, as you see them on the screen, our best guess is we have about 1,500 acres or so, and these are rough guesses, okay? 1,500 acres or so where there's no green, nothing's been proposed, it's wide open, still to be developed. which is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 to 6,000 homes. And again, our densities are getting a little bit more, so the houses are getting a little bit smaller, so those numbers could change a little bit. But somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,200, 5,500 homes that we could build with our current boundaries. And if you take 225 homes a year, I went back over the last 10 years, and that's the average, is we do about 225 single-family homes and/or townhouses a year, so 225. And those numbers can really vary, but that's the average. And really, partly, let's see, it wouldn't be as high as 225 if it wasn't for 2021, where we had like 332, so that kind of skews the average. That's aggressive, 225 houses per year, 200 may be better, but at 225. So we got somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 houses we could still build, and at 225 houses per year, that's like 23 years, based on what we currently have today, okay? And then again, if you come back and we can get the two properties up here in the northeast corner, we can get these Broderick properties mostly here in the northwest corner, then you're just adding, you're adding to that. The two properties in the northeast corner here would be somewhere between 500 and 600 homes, which at that same rate, that's another 2.5 years of building. They could go at the same time, but generally they don't. And if you could get all the Broderick properties here in the northwest corner, you're looking at about 1,500 homes in about 6.5 years. So, there's enough today to keep everybody busy for quite a while. But again, the question for you is, when does being landlocked become okay? And we know that not everything is going to get built right away. We've got commercial properties along Plum and North Park that we'll talk about here in a little bit that are still sitting there vacant. And if you recall, we've covered this before, the current comprehensive plan says, hey, that's a good thing. Not everything gets built right away. You got property that's available along the interstate. You've got it. Don't worry about it. So that's what you have to challenge yourself on, is that not everything has to get built. It's okay to have land out there for a while, but like, how much do you want to have? So with that as background on annexation, let us hear from you kind of what your big picture thoughts are about annexation. Well, and one last thing I would mention to keep in mind, because we met with Schaefer, Day, and Harding down here, which is the piece that's in Grimes now. Again, we have an agreement through 2031. They have indicated that they do not want to come in. We do believe with these parcels up here to the north, since I have had some contact with them already and they have seemed willing, we just need to follow up and try to get a meeting with them. We're trying, but we feel like I'm very hopeful on these properties up here. I think we can get those. These properties down here, they've said they don't want to come in, and so if we ever wanted to force the issue sometime between now and 2031, that would be an involuntary annexation, and we're going to have to spend some money on legal fees, and it could be in court 2 or 3 years, who knows? So just throw that into the mix. But what do you guys think about annexation? What are your thoughts?
Steve, why don't you fill in a little bit also on other services? I know we've talked about fire too, and I can't remember where we are on fire.
We would need another station.
We need one anyway, don't we, essentially, is what we're
Correct. So
planning on?
once we start pushing it all, and again, John makes a case for it might make sense to come all the way out to you, because Waterford Road would come up and through and back down. But, that's part of it's a good point. It's a strain, it's mostly going to be primarily residential, and residential, it can be a strain on services. So it does directly affect fire and police, obviously, trash, all those types of things. And it's, rooftops are great. And we have a reputation as being a wonderful suburban bedroom community. Got a lot of great things going for us, but it's not going to be primarily commercial. And rooftops can tax all that a little bit, so. Planning for the sewer is one thing, but you got to cover all the other bases as well.
Steve, you said it's not going to be primarily commercial. Is there vision at all for Alice's Road and beyond west of Alice's Road for anything but residential?
Realistically, we can get into that, and we will get into that here a little bit later, but realistically, the short answer is no. We're going to be looking at residential nodes here and there. We still have a great opportunity along North Park and along Plum and along Meredith for commercial development, whether that's office, whether that's retail, there's opportunities there, but it's pockets. We're never going to have the Hickman corridor. We're never going to have the 141 corridor. I mean, that ship has sailed. Now, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's okay. We get our citizen surveys. I mentioned the Home Depot and the Target. I mean, some other cities have some stuff, okay, but we have some stuff, and they come here. So that's the trade-off. We're certainly, from an economic development standpoint, and Curtis and Aaron will certainly speak to this, that's our goal, is to get some more of those non-residential entities in here, which kind of helps pay for taxes and covers some of those things that are a challenge for us. And we're kind of, I mentioned that 450,000 square foot warehouse that they're going to build at 128th and Meredith. That's not retail, but it's not residential, and they're going to pay a pretty hefty tax bill out there, and it's a facility that most of the metro doesn't have. So we need to embrace those types of opportunities that we don't have and that other places don't have, which can be a good thing for us. So yeah, it's the long answer to give what should be a short answer is that yes, almost anything that we do west, and this is part of what the comp plan will inform us on, other than some some commercial pockets here and there to serve the residential, that's probably all the commercial is going to be. Outside of what we already have on North Park, Plum, and Meredith, which is significant, 700 and some acres still, I think, to be developed on those, which is significant.
Steve, how do the school district boundaries line up out there too?
I'm trying to remember now where Waukee stops.
Do you know,
I should have
Bridget?
brought that. If I was thinking, I would have, sorry.
Bridget, do you know?
I don't know, but that was going to be my question.
Yeah, most all of it is going to be Waukee, which is, obviously, that's a problem that we deal with now. But somebody made the point that, it could be that if you get more people out west to kind of help balance the people we've got on the east, maybe that's a good thing. And then that if there's more people out there, they know they're in Urbandale. Yes, they're in the Waukee district, but maybe more people out west is a good thing to help people realize, hey, you're in Urbandale. I don't know, Bridget.
I think it's a great thing,
I-
and I
you
think
know,
you do too.
I think it could help.
So,
I-
and Dwayne.
I just didn't know where the DCG boundary was.
Yeah, I did not bring that, and I can't remember off the top of my head because they're so weird in terms of where they start and stop.
And then the county, so DCG is gonna capture, it's up and around and.
I can't remember where it is relative to Meadow, which is, our line follows Meadow for a while, and then it pops up almost half a mile. And if you're wondering why it does this, there's a couple of property owners there where it made sense to have it jog like that. That's why it does that.
At north end, it's a half mile south of Meadow. That's why the school is being built. It's almost at the north boundary.
The Waukee boundary, yeah. Yeah, because they were right on the edge of their boundary, weren't they? Yeah.
As far as where it goes north south, so I think it's along their west. I just don't know if it jogs.
Yeah, I don't either. I can't remember.
Well, I am continually amazed by the growth in Clive and Waukee along Meredith. With the road being closed, it's hard to access over the last year or 18 months, but for the brief time that it was open this winter, it is mind-blowing how much of that Clive portion south of Meredith and
Yeah, okay.
and even west of that. I think with the Northwest High School, we're gonna see continued development along that Meredith corridor. I don't know, is there something that's slowing the north side, the Urbandale side development along there?
Of Meredith?
Yes. Clive has just exploded on that west of 170th, and we just have a handful of houses. So, I think that's where, as long as Clive and Waukee are continuing to grow to the west, I think that's where we should focus. It makes sense to square out those things, but I think what's going on in Clive and Waukee is definitely showing there's an appetite for development along that Meredith and to the north, corridor. So that's my 2 cents right now, but I think I would like to see the school district maps and engage them a little bit in the discussions. Because I think, Waukee's always growing, but DCG is also growing quite rapidly, but it's just, I think looking to the west for that square and a half, and then that's getting that little finger that folks back in west of 180 or east of 184th.
So this area, yeah, that got left out originally because there's a creek going, that's where the drainage way that runs through there, and there's probably, what, 80% of that's not gonna be buildable. So for whatever that's worth, I mean, we should certainly look at that if we're gonna go to the west, for
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, and just to square us off there
Yep.
too is good, especially if it's not developable. But I mean, I think our number one priority obviously should be the little tan finger down there with the days and those folks, but-
Schaefer Day and Harding,
because if that's in the Urbandale School District, they need those rooftops.
that's a good point.
More than anybody,
I should have mentioned that. Those are all in the Urbandale School District for
More than
whatever that's
anybody
worth.
else.
So, and that's something to think about going forward. You know, certainly don't need to make a decision tonight, but again, these agreements are in place until 31, which means a year or even a couple of years before that, we need to start thinking about it. And at what point would there be any desire to force that issue? I mean, those are things that are gonna have to be thought about at some point down the road. So what do others think about going west and acquiring property so that we have it in terms of future years and potential for growth?
I personally say we go as far west as we possibly can. And then if we decide later on down the road, if other councils want to provide that land to other cities, I mean, we can't do anything if we don't have the land to do it in the first place, right? So for me, it's take what you can while you can, and then future councils can decide if that's something they want to continue to develop and build, or if it's something that they want to move over to Dallas Center, over to Grimes, down to Waukee, whatever. But we can't make any of those decisions if we don't have it in the first place.
We've kind of talked about this, but I'll put this up. We kind of talked about, you know, these are the different approaches that you can take. You know, is it market-led? You just wait for somebody to approach us. We're probably done with that at this point. We can work with property owners and doing capital projects, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with the Broadwicks up to the north in that northwest corner where Waterford Road would go through. Proactive, we're doing some of this too. We're having conversations with people saying, hey, we'd love you to come in. Here's what we think the benefit is for you to come in. And then the aggressive certainly would fall into the involuntary annexation of the Schaefer Day and Harding, should we ever get to that point. So, I mean, we kind of covered what those are, but I just wanted to put that up there for you. Is there consensus with this group that because we have looked at Waterford Road going through right now, Waterford Road stops here at 170th, and we have looked at a scenario where it would come through, miss the power lines, come through the Kramer property, and then drop back down and tie in about U Avenue, so it's about a 2-mile process. What are your thoughts about would it make sense to reach out to these property owners in addition to the ones that we've talked about, reach out to the property owners between V and U, whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that, and kind of gauge their interest to come in, since we do have a plan for Waterford Road that would tie back in about U Avenue? Should we, you know, it's not a big deal at all to send letters out this summer and gauge what those property owners' interest is to come in. Should we piecemeal it and just do that first mile, or should we try to go all the way out to T and just see what people think? What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like get the conversation started now. It doesn't have to be anything encouraging them immediately, but just to at least plant the seed and see what happens with it initially. I would say that for me personally, going to you at the bare minimum is something that we can be a little bit more aggressive with. I wouldn't say full-on aggressive, but a little bit more encouraging. But then also starting the conversations all the way out to T to just say, hey, we're interested if you are.
What are other thoughts about that?
I guess I'm stuck with trying to think through and balance services and being able to provide services effectively and efficiently, particularly with police, fire, medic, and growth. I like the idea expanding. You will be in the DCG school district. DCG goes down to 260th. So basically anything that we go further west, we're going to be in their district. I mean, so I don't know if we're gonna actually get folks saying, oh, we go to Northwest and we're Urbandale residents, because actually I think we're just going to confuse the process even more, to be honest,
It's already pretty.
which may not matter, I mean, ultimately. But I do think, I mean, there is a part of if you can't build it if you don't own it. But at the same time, what's realistic, and does that push us out to, 2035 or 2040 when, we can start to understand what is the impact? Do we get the properties that we currently would look at involuntary annexation? I mean, we have space for 30 years, it sounds like.
We can definitely, at this point, based on our current boundaries and hopefully being able to get a couple of these others at that north end up there, we absolutely can go another 20 to 25 years today, which takes us out to, basically 2045 to 2050.
And then my other question is, where does Xenia pop in to this map? Because that's a headache.
Yeah, that is something that we'll need to have some conversations with Dale about. We've had that in the past, and that really just kind of ends, we need to find out where they are in the overall water conversations, and I think we were going to look into that a little bit, but, we may have to just kind of write them a check is what it boils down to.
Or have a
Xenia
lawsuit.
You're right.
That's how they work.
Xenia offers a really different perspective on annexation. I know that there was a strong effort during the regionalization of the water discussion to bring them into the fold, if you will. Don't know where those conversations have gone. The last I heard, that they weren't overly excited about being considered part of that consortium, if you will. If my memory serves me right, in the conversations we had with Dale Atchison from the water utility, is that if we're not at the limit now, we will soon be there where their service area is authorized, and then you'll go into Xenia. Now, Xenia and the city of Johnston had recently a fairly significant court battle about the service of areas. As I understand it, it was a Xenia area. No service was delivered. The city of Johnston came in, delivered the services. After the dust settled, Xenia came in and said, oh, by the way, they belong to us. Thank you very much. I believe the court sided with the city of Johnston.
Yeah.
And so, but that we understand, I think Steve said it very succinctly. Other cities, predominantly Waukee, wrote sizable checks to Xenia for them to abandon water area that they could deliver more dependable water. Right now, I believe, and again, if anybody at the table knows better, but the capacity of Xenia to provide water to residential is about the extent that they can do. They do not provide fire hydrants because they don't have that capacity. And so depending upon where you're at in their service area, it gets down to the service level as we talked about. So the water is going to be a significant issue and probably will be one that it'll just be difficult, I think, just because it will involve significant payments or if there's a legal challenge. And then the consortium, I like to call it, the Regional Water Consortium is finalizing their documentation now to bring that forward here, hopefully by the end of the year. And so we'll know we'll be in a better position ourselves as knowing where we stand with the city of West Des Moines and the city of Des Moines in delivery of existing water services and how it fits. But very long answer to your short question, I believe that we are up near the boundaries of Xenia right now.
Seems to me the economy of scale of building these public improvements, i.e. fire station, police station, has to be factored in here too. If we're just going to take in just a few acres, but we have to put in a fire station and police station, that doesn't make any sense. We have to decide. I think it's a joint decision as to our economy of scale to put in these public improvements. The other thing I'm thinking about, as I look at that Harding property and you look where Grimes is situated now and where our utilities are, I'm not the judge, but it looks like a no-brainer as to where that land should go. And I wonder if we shouldn't have a land use attorney look at this and say, okay, what are our chances today? Because as Grimes grows and we get close to the 31, they're only going to improve. We aren't going to change because our utilities are there right now. They'll eventually come further south. So it seems to me if we're going to make a move on that, we should really consider moving now.
We have had some of those conversations with our attorney for annexation. He feels strongly that we would ultimately prevail. A couple of the Harding brothers are attorneys, so it's a matter of, they were pretty adamant.
There's lots of attorneys.
Oh, yeah, there are.
Everybody's an attorney.
No offense to any attorney sitting at the table up there, Mayor Bob.
That deals with real estate.
Yeah,
Wayne's a recovered attorney, right?
Yeah, that is something we should discuss again later, because again, if Hardings want to escalate it and try to sue us and get injunctions and all that kind of stuff, and that's why he says, if you try to appeal it all the way up to the Supreme Court, however far they would want to take it, you could end up in court a couple years and you could spend quite a bit on attorney's fees, and there's no guarantee you'd get it. Attorney feels pretty confident, and as you point out, Wayne, looking at the map, it seems pretty clear, a third grader could figure out where it needs to go.
And the question is even if they want to sell it though, too.
Right.
If we get it in Urbandale, but the families aren't going to sell, then it really doesn't do much good, which they seem to indicate they have no desire to develop it. I would think anybody who does want to eventually buy it to develop, if they ever change their mind and say, yeah, we're going to finally sell to develop, will want to develop it in Urbandale.
Yeah, that's a great point. The mayor was in that meeting with those property owners, and they all just made it clear, look, we just want to be left alone and farm. Now, that's fine, but the next
Age.
Right,
Quite often
exactly.
there's some tax.
Well, and that's the trick, is that, okay, if you're leaving it to the children sooner rather than later, and Mr. Developer Man says, I'm gonna write you a check, it's got this many zeros behind it, they may change their tune real fast. Now, how do you don't know, right? You can't predict that, so.
I was under the impression that Grimes really wasn't interested. They wanted us to have it.
Well, yeah, Grimes has told them, and they all acknowledged at that meeting that Grimes was not going to provide service, that Grimes has told them that, and that they eventually will develop, and they all understand that that would be in Urbandale. It's pretty much what they said in that meeting. The question is,
If they
how
call-
long?
If they call the fire department,
Right, that's my
who's
question.
coming to their house right now?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's their police is contracted with the county, correct?
Their law enforcement is contracted with Polk County. If there's a structure fire, which there are a handful of structures.
Yeah, very few.
If there's a structure fire, we have a mutual aid arrangement with the city of Johnston and Grimes that provide their fire services, along with a number of western suburban communities. So if it is a structure fire, but again, if you look at that area, there are 2 residential structures and maybe 3 to 5 outbuildings.
Yeah,
That whole acreage?
there's maybe more outbuildings than that, but it may be like a dozen. It's not a bunch. And
Yeah.
as far as residential structures, yes, I believe there are 2.
Yes, so in that whole expanse, there is really, again, for fire EMS services, that would be limited. But again, the boundaries on the western side of the Des Moines Metro for emergency services are fluid enough that if we're called to assist, we will. Now, the interesting part is that they're not part of our Westcom system. So the communication component of it, if there was a house there and you called, you would go to Polk County Dispatch. Polk County Dispatch would dispatch Johnston Fire EMS and/or Polk County Sheriff to provide that service, whatever that is. If there was a need, they would then have to contact Westcom, and Westcom would then have to dispatch whatever services they need. So again, fair question, but at the same time, there is very little population that would require our services. And again, from a fire standpoint, if it's a structure fire, more than likely we would go at the same time. There was a question earlier raised, and I know that Chief Holt has had conversations with the city of Waukee, and they are a bit dated now, but about as we looked westward and as they look at their boundaries, where their next fire station would be and where they're going to provide services. And it's not inconceivable that we would have a relationship that we have with the city of Clive now. They might build something that would be a first unit response and that we provide financial support for that. So we've looked at those options. that might make more sense for us. Again, it is the Clive Urbandale arrangement has worked out really well, and it services predominantly residential areas. Of course, there's commercial, but predominantly residential areas. We saw that same scenario being true as Waukee looked to expand their service capacity.
So just to kind of cap off annexation, unless anybody has anything more, what I'm hearing, I think is, yep, let's go ahead and continue to work on getting these properties up here at the north boundary in. And like I said, we've started that process, trying to follow up with a couple of property owners to see if we can make that happen. We'll just kind of let this sit on the table for now. I think we're all aware of what the issue is down there. And we can go ahead and reach out over the next couple of months, all the way out maybe to T, go 2 miles out from where our current boundary is, send a very general letter to those property owners and just maybe gauge some interest and see what they think. And then once we have that information, we can schedule something additional down the road to kind of talk about, okay, here's what we got back, where do we go from here? That sound like a plan? And in the meantime, we'll be, dealing with the comp plan, and the main thing we wanted to know is, do you have an interest in going west? And it sounds like you do, yet to be determined how far west, but yeah, we should definitely look at that as an option.
I think you've outlined it well, and to the extent reasonable, at the risk of sounding like a lawyer, to the extent reasonable and where it's justifiable and there's mutual benefit, I think going west and then sort of covering those pockets in the middle, and then sort of the treatment of that fingered area from Grimes east of 142nd and north of, whatever that is, but that's maybe where it's not necessarily advantageous to go aggressive there. I understand what you're saying, and I think it makes sense.
And that strategy, we can talk about it, what we do later. Again, we have an agreements in place until 31. Do you pick a number prior to that and meet with them? And if they're still like, yeah, no, then you want to get it done before that? Or, we can determine all that later. Our esteemed panel, any other questions relative to annexation or comments that we want to make sure we get out there now? Yeah.
Just for context, the reason kind of this is important is because the draft framework land use plan that we've seen from the consultant shows agricultural reserve anything outside the city boundary. They have put that there because they have said you should really focus internally right now. And so they've not designated any future land use other than agricultural reserve beyond the existing city boundaries. And so I realized as Steve was talking, that's probably important context that we should have added for you as bullet number 1. So they're mapping things and they're stopping at the current municipal boundary. And we're not quite sure that's what we want to show. So just for background, they're starting to color up the map and we're like, we need some more input. So thank you.
I was going to say that I agree with you, Christy, and Larry, that we should be very assertive going north and assertive going west if it makes sense financially. So if it's very expensive with roads and very expensive with water, then put a yellow light, but don't let that dissuade you. So I'd say assertive going west, even if it doesn't look favorable now, because it could in a few years.
Yeah, we're going to need to, it's been several years since we had staff talk about annexation. So as part of figuring out what do we want to do, once we can get some feedback, we need to get with Dale, we need to get with fire, we need to get with police and just kind of have those conversations. What's the reality of doing this going to mean?
And also, I know it's very complicated with the Day property in Grimes. Could you give a 1-minute synopsis on what the issue is? Because I don't know.
Yeah, they don't like us.
It's a 5-word synopsis.
Yeah, it is. It's 3 different families, and particularly with, so Schaefer, which is, Nicole, can you pop that back up there again? Schaefer, which is the piece that's north of Meredith here, he'd come in tomorrow. He's fine. Well, and we might, but we can't take all of him because then it creates the island. That's the problem. So this is Harding here, and then the leftover square right there, that's all Day. Hardings and Day families have known each other for forever and a day. They talked about in the meeting when they were kids, and they've got the one barbed wire fence that separates the two properties and just, reliving the good old days type of thing. Harding's in particular just brought up stuff that's just like 15 years old, that there was an issue. And part of how we approached that meeting was got almost all new leadership from back when you had issues. Mayor's been here a long time, but some of the stuff they brought up, you weren't mayor at that point, and new council and previous engineering director isn't here and previous community development director isn't here. So we really tried to express to them, look, we want to be partners with you. They acknowledge they will eventually develop into Urbandale. And so we just wanted a chance to meet them and talk with them and try to set a good tone. Maybe that'll mean something, maybe it won't, but they, that, and they're just convinced that the minute they come in, Urbandale's gonna move in there and, put some big assessment on them for a road and this and that and the other. I mean, there's just lots of past history there that half of it isn't really legitimate, in my opinion.
I think the days alone would be a little more reasonable, but I think
Yes.
once they get in the room with the Hardings kind of,
I agree.
harden them to say, no, we're not gonna do this.
My intent when we had the meeting was to meet with them separately. So I reached out to Days, and first thing that happens is one of the Day brothers goes to Harding's and pulls them into the meeting. It's just like, and it went about like we thought it might. So in Days, obviously, we got Days Run, we've got Days Run West. They clearly have sold off some of that family's property in the past to be developed. So I do think, I agree with Bob. I think they're more open to it, but Harding's just don't want anything to do with it. And unless we get all three of them, so.
Who's farming it? Are they leasing it? Or are they farming it?
Dale Day really probably does it. Schaefer does his own.
Yeah.
And the Day property and the Harding property, Dale Day, actually, he and family members do most of the actual farming of those properties. Then he does Calvert's across the street too, Dale does.
Are there any promises we could give to those two families that say we won't put an assessment or the assessment will be no more than X percent?
We've tried, Jeff.
Yeah.
They don't believe us, it's one of those things.
Right.
They don't believe that whatever we say they would be enforceable. We've tried every, I'm sorry, I've been just laughing because we've gone through all those iterations over time.
But apparently you've run that.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
that would seem rational, yeah.
The state code relative to annexation does allow us to offer a 10-year graduated tax abatement. And so it's years 1 and 2, it's 85, or it's 15%, then it's 15% every year, 2 years at a time. And we even threw that in there. And one of the Day brothers basically said, I think it added up to $50,000 or something that we could save them over the 10 years, all things being equal. And he basically said, 50 grand doesn't mean anything to me. Which, if that's what you're dealing with. Now, keep that in mind for some of these other properties. That likely is something that we're going to want to explore and certainly get mayor and council authorization to be able to do that. But that is something that code does allow, is to be able to save them a little bit of money on their taxes. And I believe the difference, I had Nikki do an exhibit several years ago, it's time to revisit that, but the difference between Urbandale city limits and unincorporated Dallas County, we could definitely save them a little bit of money, so.
It's cheaper.
Yep.
I anticipate there'd be some kind of analysis that would come in the review timeframe. I don't know, cost benefit, SWOT, something.
Yep.
Just to show that things are justifiable and reasonable, and even maybe some sort of phased plan to lay out exactly the options that you said, like this area here is going to be more of this area here, more of that. I think to be able to see options and to see it by approach would be helpful as a visual, and to lay out those, to have those different layers of the things that we're discussing, whether it's services or tax implications, school districts, things like that matter.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to kind of gauge property owners' interest out there, and then once we get that information and we know what we're looking at, if it seems like, hey, we could go through a voluntary process and get this done, we should convene and talk about the specifics and the numbers involved in doing that. That would certainly make sense, so.
Could we get a map, and not like tomorrow or anything, that kind of focuses on this area but overlays the school districts and the water
Yep,
services?
yep, we sure can.
And even with that, like trends or foreseeable opportunities, it's one thing for us to sort of imagine what that is just based off our experiences, but you guys see a whole different set of activity directly through your administration.
As far as growth?
Growth or taxability, I have no idea. All the factors, I guess. I don't really have one.
Okay, yeah, we can throw some general information out there.
Yep, that'll be it for me.
Anything else on annexation? We want to make sure we talked a little bit with you about housing and about commercial growth too, so.
I just keep coming back to fire coverage and police coverage and the cost of that.
Yep. That's probably the next biggest meeting we need to have is infrastructure type issues like that. If we acquire A, how are we set up to handle that? And if we acquired B, how are we set up to handle that and make some decisions based on that information?
With response times and,
Yep.
I mean, are we looking then at a 28E to cover some of the space or, I mean, what are the options available?
Yep. Anything else with annexation before we move to residential? Do we want to do that now? Okay. We've got food across the hall in the room, so take what, 5 minutes?
It's in the large conference room. There's sandwiches, chips, and cookies. And then please help yourself to drinks and break room.
Oh, wait a
So
minute.
5 o'clock, about residential a little bit. I'm going to talk very big picture, and then Aaron's going to come up and get a little bit more specific with you. Again, this is all very big picture though. So some different types of housing on the screen for you here in terms of new development. You've got medium, low density, single family, which has kind of always been our thing. Mixed density, multifamily, generational, age in place. We've started to require that. Some zero entry on a few homes here and there and some of our developments. And then probably the bigger conversation is, kind of the new planning thing that people are doing all over the country is infill and ADUs. Those are the two things you always hear about. So I want to talk a little bit about that as well. But so again, what do we have? Well, the important thing to remember is how things were. When I started here in 2005, and our zoning ordinance is based on residential lots with minimum widths of 70, 80, and 90 feet. And so when I started, you didn't come to council and propose residential lots less than 75 feet. Everything was at least 75 feet. I still remember the Days Run West villas at 128th and Meredith that Hubble has there. And they were basically tiny single-family homes on individual lots. And I'll never forget council approved that as an experiment to see how that would work. That was the term that was used back then. And so you fast forward to today, we still have the Acadias of the world where they're doing like 2.6 units per acre, actually less than that, probably closer to 2, on big suburban lots, which there's always going to be a market for that in Urbandale. That's what we've been known for. That's what people like. But we are, that said, now, our townhomes, we're getting quite a different mix of townhomes in terms of more base units, more bigger, extremely nice units. And we're starting to see smaller lots. We're having more 60 and 65-foot lots. We've got several developments now. We had one that was at 46, which is just south of the school out on 170th. And that developer said, you know what, that's just a little too tight. So they come back in with 50s. And we've had several developments now where they're doing 50-foot lots. So we are, as the market is demanding, seeing some higher densities. And that's kind of what everybody's doing around the country is these higher densities, particularly when it comes to infill. If you've got an older part of town and you've got a handful of lots and a developer wants to buy 3 or 4 of those and put a multifamily building up. Now, the problem with that is the people that are living there in the single family homes go, what are you doing? We don't want that here. So that's something we have to think about and address. But so it really comes down to, are you satisfied with the market demanding some of these smaller lots and moving in what I think is the right direction? Or do we want the comp plan to be more aggressive in terms of what types of housing we're going to require and where we're going to require them, okay? So that's kind of big picture stuff to think about. Aaron, you want to get into more specifics?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Aaron Dion with the Economic Development Department. So looking at the residential, you kind of take it in 2 chunks. One is the new residential. We just talked about annexation types of things. And so think about those greenfield sites and what are the expectations that the development community would have in those areas. And Steve put it aptly is, you know, in Urbandale, we are the single family sure thing, and have been for a long time. And then looking out westward, do we want to change that tune? Is there an interest in doing that and in looking at different density types in those? So, you know, look at those, the mixed density, single family. So infusing more townhomes by design into projects rather than reacting to them when they come through the development process. And then on the multifamily, you know, there is an interest in affordability, and when you can spread out the land costs across many units, you can achieve that easier. Not to say that it's easy, but it's easier when you can do densities that Urbandale hasn't seen in a while in that regard. And then also looking at the generational, you know, trying to design housing types and infuse them into our western neighborhoods that there might be a housing type that isn't prevalent now, but maybe in the future. So think multi-generational housing. You know, ADU is our solution to it right now, but do we want to be more proactive about that type of thing? So, and then as it relates, I'm trying not to touch it, but I need to, is that, you know, when you do go the higher density route, you are creating a greater opportunity for that neighborhood retail to be successful. If you stay at the 70, 80 foot lot widths, you're only going to get so many wallets within that 2-mile drive frame to make that retail work. So it's one of those things that we should design our residential neighborhoods in the West the way we would like to see them. But also, you know, it's one of those factor points is, you know, what kind of retail are we expecting in those Western neighborhoods? And what can we do to prop those up where if we want those? And density is a great leverage tool for that. So, and maybe we'll stop and then get reactions to the kind of looking at greenfield developments out west and then these other areas to get your feedback on kind of what are the crayons that we should be looking at coloring with when we're looking at new development?
Well, I want a 64-pound box of crayons. All of them. So I want us to be as aggressive as possible in broadening our horizons in terms of housing types available. I'm a dead horse when it comes to how much more affordable housing we need, both rental and owner occupied. You know, Waukee bought a number of acres and did an RFP to you know, make affordable housing in you know, one of the more affluent communities in our state. So I think, you know, they can do it. I think we could do it in Dallas County as well. But I also want to see us focusing on our eastern border. I think it would be a great, I think Matt and I both talked to AARP about maybe being a suburban model for an ADU project on an existing suburban, in a suburban community doing an ADU on a existing home. I think that would, there's got to be some lots that we could look at doing an ADU, and I think there's money out there to do a, you know, a trial project. So I want to do it all. That's no surprise to anyone, but I think Urbandale needs to be more aggressive in just expanding our housing stock. I mean, we are very good at Acadia type developments.
Sure. Yep.
And will continue to be very good and desirable, but I think we need to redouble our efforts on the other stuff.
Higher density specific.
Yes. And making sure that we're keeping up our housing stock with like the NFC and those sorts of things in our, you know, because that's naturally occurring affordable housing. Maybe not to the lowest of income, but we have to keep that part of town revitalized.
Well, I think the healthiest communities are diverse communities. I mean, Bridget and I came from, sorry, I don't even have one. That could be a problem. Healthiest communities are diverse communities and provide choices for everybody, and you can do it through rehabbing existing housing stock or creating new, and density is a driver to make housing affordable. I work in housing, so I understand it, and right now, the current economy is challenging, and the only way you can be successful in providing the housing community need is to be flexible. And there's some really creative solutions out there, and I think it, as you mentioned, that's the driver for additional retail. You know, we can't continue to develop 2 houses an acre and expect retail nodes to succeed. There's not enough people to do it. And I think suburbs typically are adverse to density, and there's examples in suburbs all across the country that are now increasing their density and with very successful models. A key to that is transportation, which we're lacking. But I think that can also be solved because you have to get those people to their jobs in other ways than cars sometimes. But we have to be willing, and like Bridget said, affordable. I mean, you want your people who work in your community to be able to live in your community.
And stay in your community.
Spend the money in their community and.
Well, and stay long-term. So, I mean, when we think about ranch, we think about like accessible ADUs for sure, but I think about accessibility. How do we make sure that we have options for our seniors so when they can't live in their 2-story house any longer, they have a place that they can still call home in Urbandale?
Yeah, I've been tooting that horn for the last couple of years of, that's the number one thing I hear from folks is they can't retire here. They have to find something that's more accessible for them, and we don't provide that as a city. So affordable in both ways.
I'm going to be all over board, but I'll be brief, so that's better. On the east side of Urbandale, we have a lot of empty lots, double lots, triple lots, where somebody bought the house 50 years ago or 60 years ago, and they had an extra lot. I think that's an opportunity for us to either offer some abatement to them tax-wise or encourage them to sell that lot and put a more modern, smaller house in those 15 or 20 lots that are in the eastern side of our city. It happened on 70th Street maybe 10 years ago. There was a double lot and there's a brand new smaller house. It fits into the neighborhood well. I also think that there's lots of programs to help remodel homes in that area. You're probably working on that I don't know about, but remodeling, giving people some access to capital. In the central part of the city, I'm not giving up on Living History Farms. I still think, I know somebody met with Living History Farms. I think there are some opportunities along the interstate to do commercial. They've already sold some land on the south end of their properties, commercial, the north end across from the truck stop and east or west of Bob Brown.
But will you support it at P&Z?
Absolutely, 100%, because there's no homes next to it, and it's sitting there as farmland. And then also, I think there's housing opportunities along the north and west side of Living History Farms. And I'm not talking about hundreds of acres. I'm talking about maybe 200 feet in around that and buffer Living History Farms, make it look more attractive to people along the route, but also sell a couple hundred residential lots and spruce it up. So I'm not giving up on Living History Farms. I'd help meet with you if that helps. If it doesn't help, don't bring me. And then further west, I think we ought to really put a lot of thought on commercial, really trying to find targeted commercial and higher end apartments, higher end, higher rise condos, like across from Des Moines Golf, there's like a 7-story condo project, and maybe be bolder and try to find somebody that would do that kind of thing as we have a clean palette going west. In higher end apartments, I just think we've kind of missed the trend on that. And when you get higher end apartments, you get younger people, then you get more restaurants, you get more retail. And Ankeny exploited that all day long. Waukees been doing it. I think we could do it maybe as we plan further west to be conscious to do that or offer some aid to make it happen, short-term aid, I don't know. And then I like the concept of what they have at 86 and North Park. That's a small project, but it has a lounge down below, but then a dry cleaner and a bunch of small, and then apartments upstairs. And I think we could do that more targeted out west before the houses get there and make it 4 stories kind of like Urban Cellar in West Des Moines on South 50th. It's a large condo project with retail down below, and that's something we've never had, but it could be something more, gives us more personality, more flexibility.
Plum Drive next to Home Depot, kind of that same concept.
I'm excited about that one, very excited. Yeah, I love that concept. I'd love to have 10 of those.
I'm hearing a little bit against, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I've made this point to Christy before. So many of my friends that were getting to be older might want different options. Ranch, senior housing, not 3-story where you got to go across the street to get your car in the garage. There aren't any senior villas. Waukees got them, Johnston's building them. And the friends that I hang out with at the senior center, there's a demand for that. People want to stay in Urbandale, but there's no housing stock that meets those needs.
Right, thank you. So my consent, go ahead.
I guess I would add on to a lot of this, or just sort of summarize it. I'd taken some notes here. Yes, agreeing on affordability. And in terms of like where this maybe makes sense is from the standpoint of complementary or thematic planned communities or districts within Urbandale. Maybe this is some way we can find a way to be or to maintain our uniqueness. You know, it maybe isn't just about single family homes so much as it could be about maybe historic shopping, recreational, or retirement areas that are individualized and tailored to the needs of the citizens in the community. You can arrive at that through, focus groups or survey data on their preferences or where they work and live, that kind of thing, trying to map those things out. Or it could be as indicated by supporting in unique infrastructure. Maybe it's the trail system, or maybe it's adjacent shopping, things that I was just alluding to a second ago. And just some examples that I've seen from, my own past living in Iowa City. People will write these things up or down based off of their experiences, but I felt like they had some success with them in some ways. Iowa River Landing was one of those as I was leaving town. And then the Foster Road development was kind of a unique, I guess you could call it infill. Maybe it would be called infill, but it had a lot of that same medium to low density single family residential mixed with commercial. And I felt like those things were complementary, supportable, and, kind of the need of the city at the time, which is sort of what we're dealing with right now. That's
Great.
it.
So on the new residential side, just to try to summarize it, it sounds like infusing housing diversity when we have those chances is what the community, so this kind of single family only type of things when we're looking at larger swaths of land is, infusing more multifamily townhome, make that, make those stair steps and densities throughout a project to keep that ratio from still, you got to start somewhere with that.
You put multifamily along major transit corridors. Instead, on our major transit corridors, we have large single-family lots with the backyards facing the major traffic, so take advantage of those major traffic corridors, multifamily housing, density, then layer them out so you've got your least dense surrounded by your more density. Buffer those streets. No one wants to live on high-traffic streets. Take advantage of it. That's where multifamily people those units are at an advantage because people can get there quickly. And, that's the first step on planning them, and then put your commercial nodes near those dense areas.
I am new to the housing world, don't really understand. I mean, I understand it, obviously, I live in a house, but that's about where it ends. But one of the things I saw, I went to the Polk County Housing Trust Fund conference last week, and it was exciting to see some of the, I assume it's multifamily, it's like 4-plex, 6-plex, 8-plex that fit the same footprint as a single-family residential structure. And the thought crossed my mind, I'm like, that would be neat. That would be cool. There's ways that you can get to density, but yet still keep that neighborhood feel. and still create a sense of community that I think could work really well here, particularly in Eastern Urbandale, but probably out in Western Urbandale as well.
I tried to hold you back at just talking about new out west, and then you jumped on it and went towards the infill, which is great, because that's going to be, that's kind of, redevelopment is hard. And so, what kind of colors can we color with? And on the screen here is, looking at the ADU, yes, we have it now, but it's kind of a restrictive thing where it needs to be a like party on your property. Do we create that as an opportunity for it to be rental and help with the affordability of buying a single family lot? Are we looking at, from a single family conversion to a multifamily type of product that still is in scale with the neighborhood, but has more units and hence more opportunities for density, for wallets, for the retailers, and also to create that affordability as well. One thing we haven't talked about is to do some of these larger projects, particularly in the multifamily when we're looking at existing neighborhoods, the parcel sizes aren't fit for that right now. So the aggressiveness related to assemblage, cities can play a role in that. We have not to date, but is that a interested topic for Urbandale when we're looking at our existing corridors? I'm trying not to say one in particular because I think they're all going to come up. Their number's going to be called sometime within our lifetimes. And so is that something that should be pursued and encouraged within this major planning effort that we're doing?
I would say absolutely. I think the council that is seated right now is 180 degrees from the experimentation of those townhouses at 128th and Meredith, and we're willing to use all the colors and see what we can get success with. And that's been our discussion for over the last several years. I'm eager to get those colors out, and with Jackie on the zoning commission, I have full, we came up together with the city of Des Moines, and she's a real bona fide expert in doing these sorts of things, both new and infill construction on affordable housing. So I just want to do it all now. Let's get going.
Before we move on to commercial, because we got about 17 minutes left, Julie Rothler, you're a realtor. I think you're online. What would you want to offer, if anything, on the housing discussion?
Oh, thank you. I didn't realize you knew I was there. I think you guys. I think you guys have done a great job covering all the things. Urbandale, I'll be very repetitive in what I'm going to say. Urbandale is known for their single family awesomeness and trails and a wonderful community to live in, but I think exploring a lot of different opportunities. I liked what Marcus, I think Bridget were kind of talking about different areas that they've seen, like Marcus was talking about Iowa City. Look at other communities and see some of the cool stuff that's out there, because there's no reason we have to be pigeonholed as one thing. So, no, that's all I've got. And I also really agree with Joan. I think ranches or people in retirement and would be really good. They're hard to find.
We have consensus, folks? Kind of. Thank you for that. Now we're on to commercial. So just to set up kind of the stage a little bit to have the discussion. So we're in a changing commercial landscape now, and particularly in the office market. We're seeing things happen a lot, particularly in our downtown core. And when I say downtown, I mean Des Moines, because we are in this big pool together in trying to figure out how the way we work from a professional standpoint, how that's all going to shake out. We got shocked into something with the pandemic, and major changes were made. It hasn't happened, the shock hasn't happened equally the other way around. And so when we're looking at the office market in Urbandale, when we're looking at non-residential, we are very heavy on the office side, particularly our visible corridors. And so, we see absorption of our existing product going to take longer than anyone has expected. And so that also has implications for our greenfield commercial areas, particularly along the urban loop, for when those properties will be decided to be developed, because there is a lot more competition for that same type of product. And so that's something that is in my mind, certainly, and now in yours, because I said it. And then secondly, certainly on the retail side, we are in a maturing retail environment. And by maturing, I mean retailers are getting pickier and pickier all the time. When looking at that, and in retail, there's kind of two main components. There's the destination retail. There's the places that you'll drive a long travel distance to go to. Think that, and in our Des Moines Metro, it is Ankeny and it is Jordan Creek. Those are the two barbells of the retail network here for the Metro. And then the other side would be the neighborhood. So it would be the things that you have that 2-mile drive time, where you have that captive audience, where you're not going to drive all the way across town to go to the chiropractor. I mean, some folks may, but not on the regular. So it's those things where you want to have close by, but also don't need thousands upon thousands of customers to be able to make it work. And so when looking at those, we aren't one of the barbells for retail, so getting the major things is going to be a challenge. It would have to be created to do that. And showing our annexation maps and those types of things, those areas are dwindling if we were to do that. And our transportation network, if we were going to do new all the way out west, we don't have a ring road to handle the northwest side, and there is no plans to do one. So to have those major retail option in Urbandale, it might have passed us by in doing that. So it's a factor. And then I always think about my days at SimCity. And so you got residential, you got commercial, and now we're going to talk industrial. We're talking about the yellow. And so I think we're doing a good job in that front. I mean, we're seeing quality developments along the urban loop for that. Certainly the changing of the retail, industrial is becoming the new retail a bit, in that it's where it's housed before it goes to your front doorstep, and that type of thing. So it's creating those separate pressures. And so looking at those, again, we're going to do the same thing with growth in the new development areas. And these options that we have here up on the screen are kind of in intensity order. So the lowest intensity up top, and then the most intensity kind of at the bottom. Single-use commercial areas, that would be, looking at the owner-user type of products. Most recently would be, a great example would be the Worldwide Logistics new building out on Meredith. I mean, it was built for a single purpose, a great single purpose in doing that. And so each property is handled in itself with very little relation to its neighbors. Secondly, next into that would be the kind of the neighborhood commercial centers. So, those smaller retail buildings that are utilizing the densities around it to create those commercial opportunities for retailers, for service providers, restaurants, those types of things. So the neighborhood centers can get bigger with the densities that are around it. Third would be the mixed-use commercial focus. And what we say to that is, looking at those office, looking at those sometimes flex types of properties, but then also layering on those densities with multifamily housing with those, as well as kind of making a district type of feel with greater densities, and parking being less of a focus in those areas, and then to layer on top of that, which would be the highest intensity, would then be really swinging for the fences with the amenity side of things to prop up that increase in densities, so that you're creating that placemaking. It's not only dense buildings that are big and next to each other, but also having those areas where a commercial development wouldn't do it to a level that would make it super awesome in that type of thing. So I'll pause there hopefully I'm clear on those to understand kind of where your heads are at when we're looking at our greenfield developments on the commercial side. Mostly, and right now it's mostly along the urban loop, along the interstate corridor, where these greenfield opportunities are right now.
I'll go first and say that with respect to the neighborhood commercial centers and mixed-use commercial focus, I think that ties back to affordable housing. And I think this is an area where, maybe this has become less contentious than historical, when it's done sensibly and it's advantageous for everybody. The other thing I'd say with that is that the experiment's been run. I mean, we see it in other communities. We see it even in our own. I think the things that I've seen in my short time being on P&Z, we've seen a changing landscape in that area, and it seems like it's been working. And, I think one way to sort of eliminate the rousing or the issues that come before us with respect to, maybe single-family homes versus multifamily versus commercial, building right next to each other, is just sort of take it out of their hands and sort of put it all packaged in one approach and make it transparent and usable for people that way, and say, we're going to create this entire district in one foul swoop instead of trying to do it piecemeal. Then it becomes obvious and, I just think overall less contentious.
So I agree with everything you have here. In the interest of time, I won't go dot by dot, but I would hope that you'd add medical in there too. I think we've missed the medical wave of the last few years. Waukees getting 2 large clinics. West Des Moines always had medical. And Ankeny has, I think, 5 large clinics, including Iowa Ortho and Unity Point and Iowa Clinic. So maybe we court some of these groups now and say in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to go west. We're going to be part of Grimes. I'm sorry, we're going to touch Grimes. We want your next Iowa Clinic, 50,000 square foot building here, and we'll help you out with whatever incentives you'd like to extract from us. But I would go to Iowa Clinic first because they've got the ability to grow right now and have the capital. And maybe the Iowa Orthos, there's one in Johnston that's right on our border. Perhaps DeMoss, something like that. But go to the ones that are lucrative, making money, and aggressive. Talk to them now about our growth westward and northward towards Grimes and towards Waukee.
It won't be taxable, but at a meeting that I was at last month, the Broadlawns indicated that they're looking along Plum Drive, and maybe some of it would be owned by a private developer. But, I think that's a great driver to Urbandale. It's not going to get us tax base, but it's going to bring people in, and we definitely need more visits to support our need for restaurants and those sorts of things. And I'm not making that up. Am I, Curtis? You
No.
shook your head about the Broadlawn project?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
It was a very public meeting.
Yeah, it may have already been.
The CEO and the chair of the board.
yeah,
No, you're not.
I think they actually talked about it here too at one point. I think having some sort of district would be amazing, especially as we look at expanding west and looking at that direction, because I was just told on Saturday by somebody, we are officially on the west side, the convenience store capital of Iowa. So I don't know if that's the title we want, but that's where we're at. So seeing something go out there other than, what we see today, and maybe designating an area as we look at that western portion to say this could be a district to draw more of our western residents over to. Because as it stands right now, there's a lot of folks on the west side that, if it wasn't for their trash can, they wouldn't know that they lived in Urbandale. So,
And build off the trail system that's out there too.
yeah, I think building on the trail system would be amazing.
Just 2 comments. I think that we forget that people, when they go shopping, don't look at city borders. They're going to look at what's closest. I'm guessing Bridget doesn't come to this Hy-Vee. She goes to the one in Waukee, as an example.
So does Steve.
But
Well, after work, yeah. No, exactly.
And so I think we all need to be cognizant of that when we talk about retail, and especially West Urbandale, what's closest for those folks. And my other comment, I was doing some cleaning today because it was too windy for me to be outside. And I found the 2003 summary of the comp plan that I got when I joined the Planning and Zoning Commission in 2012. Under preservation and revitalization, revitalize the downtown Urbandale neighborhood commercial district. So 20 years later, and we're still having the same discussion. So I don't remember what was done before I joined P&Z. There's been few things, but as we go forward in this reiteration of the comp plan, maybe, you know, housing above or some other entities. But I have it's back to retail. At the moment, I have no reason to go to the old downtown Urbandale.
And if you
Somebody
go there,
needs to give me a reason to go there and find easy parking.
and if you do go there, you can't find anything because
I'm
So-
sorry, Larry,
if you do go there, you can't find anything because the signage in that part of town is horrible. So you can't see what we even have down there.
Yes, you're guiding me to the last part of our
Perfect.
conversation tonight regarding this. So yes, now we're looking at kind of the commercial corridors that we have existing. And so again, from lowest intensity at the top to highest intensity going to the bottom is the first one, maintaining existing uses, buildings, densities. I call that shake what your mama gave you. It's let's work with the building infrastructure that we have today to spruce up what we have. Second would be to take those buildings and the current and the housing and the stock that we have, but then open it up for additional uses. You know, most of downtown Urbandale is the main example when we're talking about redevelopment. You know, it's in our CN zoning district, and it's our most restrictive type of corridor. I mean, it's mostly get your normal. Steve would have a better example of it, what it is, but it's very few uses compared to our highway commercial, which it would be our most. And so, you know, are we open to opening that up? You know, nighttime live music after 10 p.m. is not allowed in the downtown area. And, you know, restaurants are lacking because of grease traps and also parking counts. I mean, we require parking for new restaurants, and it was built in the 40s and 50s, the downtown area, and they didn't park them like the way we require now. So those are some of those things to have to massage to allow greater viability for the existing stock that we have. And then third, you know, encourage greater densities, amenities, and redevelopment. Are we looking at assemblages? Do we want to bring buildings to the front, to the street? Do we want to have parking be a secondary thing rather than a primary type of interest for the retail? These are major things to talk about. And also when you're talking about the transportation networks is where do all these cars and where does the activity go? Are we looking at different types of transportation network in downtown to facilitate these greater densities, which just doesn't have today. And so we're trying to figure out in this first main draft of this comprehensive plan in these focus areas of what are the kind of the crayons that we should be drawing with when it comes to looking at our existing corridors, because like I've said it before, change is hard, redevelopment is hard. And there are lots of vested interests within these corridors. We want to be thoughtful about all of those while also promoting this revitalization, which we haven't done since 2003. I read the same comp plan when I came here in 2019, and there's a lot of work to do. Urbandale's getting into the redevelopment business. We've been greenfield development up until today, and so now we are wanting to look inward. We have been for a long time, but this comprehensive plan is setting the stage for how do we want to do it? So we want your feedback regarding that as well, as we have about 5 more minutes.
You know, I just was up in uptown area of Ankeny, and I thought, gosh, this is really neat how they've completely redeveloped uptown in Ankeny. I don't know how they do it. That's, you know, the folks who know how to do that sort of stuff. But it was a model that I thought, I wonder if this has applicability for downtown Urbandale.
I think there's consideration to be made for districts, as we've been talking about them today, versus downtown versus city center, and trying to understand what the ambiguity of those things is and what we really want for an identity going forward. And I don't know what that answer is today, but it's just something that we've talked about in previous meetings, and I don't know if we left it anywhere. But everything that you're showing on the screen, I don't think is a big departure from the things we're talking about already.
Combining the annexation talk with some of these other ideas, we have one huge advantage, and I think Jeff used the phrase, a clean palette. And I'd be interested to know, when John comes in, is it John? Yeah, John comes in with his wealth of experience, what ideas he would have, because it's not very often you run into that sort of a clean palette, that much land with no preconceived notions, with a lot of ideas. So I'm really going to be interested to see what you can draw out of him in terms of hey, you could do this, you could do that, and be creative about it.
I'm going to keep you to your hard stop. Yeah, if there's any last comments that you're itching to get out, we'd love to take them now. Otherwise,
You're always welcome to share them with staff.
of course. Yeah, if you think of something that, oh man, I should have said that, please send it our way. We'll keep you updated.
All right.
Thank you so much for your